Today we are in the book Before Columbus. We are focusing only on the section A Garden Without Gardeners, and you can find it on page 91 in your unit book. Across North America, the new diseases destroyed or weakened Native American societies. For centuries, these societies had managed the land, burning undergrowth each year, hunting bison and netting salmon, clearing and replanting forests, building canals and terraces and irrigation ditches, planting milpa and fields. When the Indians started to disappear, their managed environment suddenly became a garden without gardeners. So the natives, they did a lot of work on the land. They managed it. They treated it, kind of like a garden. They took care of it. They made the land work for them. They had it cleared. There were forests. They had this whole system. And then once the Indians started to disappear because of the virus, the land, nobody was there to take care of it anymore. Without Indian fire to hold it back, forests started to spread into grasslands in places like Ohio, Missouri, and Texas. Everywhere, untended maize fields were overgrown with weeds, then bushes and trees. In the eastern forest, the open park-like landscapes of groves and orchards quickly filled in, becoming dark, thick woods. The animal life of the continent exploded too. With fewer Indians hunting them, deer, elk, and bison increased greatly in numbers. Game overran the land. In 1579, when Sir Francis Drake became the first English mariner to sail into San Francisco Bay, he saw a land of plenty where uncountable numbers of large, fat deer roamed. Drake did not know that just a century earlier, before disease spread into California from places that had had contact with Europeans, the shoreline of the bay was thickly settled by Indians, and deer were much scarcer. So now that there's nobody hunting them, the animals are repopulating. There's nobody killing them, they're not dying off. So now we're getting a lot more animals. Bison might have suddenly become more numerous too. When Hernando de Soto's expedition crisscrossed the southeast for 4 years in the middle of the 16th century, the Spanish encountered many people, but their reports of the trip don't mention bison. When French explorers traveled down the Mississippi more than a century later, they found the land empty of people, although large bison herds grazed on the prairies along the river. So the first explorers expedition, lots of people, but no animals. And then more than a century later, after the disease had wiped out Native American populations, it is the opposite. Now the explorers are finding lots of animals and no people. For many people, these vast herds of bison are symbols of natural North America before the Europeans came. Some researchers now think, though, that the herds became huge only after the new diseases started killing Indian hunters. There are many ways to peer into the past. Archaeologists who are examining places where Native Americans lived can count the bones and seeds in their old garbage pits to learn what they ate. Environmental scientists can study how people, plants, and animals interact to learn how changing one species affects the other species that share its ecosystem. In these and many other ways, archaeologists and ecologists are revealing a new picture of the American past. Much remains to be learned about the details, and not all experts agree on all points. Still, most researchers now agree that the Native Americans managed their ecosystems on a large scale. When the Indians suddenly lost massive numbers of people to disease, they could no longer manage their ecosystems on that scale, and things started to change. It happened fast. Many of the first European explorers and settlers in the Americas wrote about finding abandoned fields and forest groves that were so free of undergrowth that they could gallop through them on horses or ride among the trees in carriages. This was a landscape that had been created by the Native Americans. Already, though, the forest was taking over. By the time of the American Revolution in the late 18th century, many parts of the continent were covered with thick, uninhabited woodland. The people of the newly created United States did not realize that much of the land had been very different when the first Europeans arrived. They thought that the forest had been there forever, primitive and unchanging. The forest was just the latest transformation of the landscape, however. Change began with the Native American peoples who manipulated their environment for thousands of years. When they were no longer around to oversee their parklands, woodlands, orchards, and gardens, the forest took over. Human beings had shaped the landscape, and human beings and their diseases helped create the wilderness that followed. It may be a while before our school books and TV shows catch up with the fact that the Americas were not a wilderness when the European settlers arrived, or that the forests of Amazonia contained thousands of carefully planted tree gardens, or that pyramids existed on the coast of Peru before they existed in Egypt. These and other revolutionary new views of the past are still taking shape, as fresh discoveries and discussions add to our knowledge of the Americas before Columbus. Early Native American societies were older, bigger, and more complex than modern historians once thought. For thousands of years, as they created maize, landscaped with fire, and managed populations of game animals, Indians made use of the land. They also built cultures whose influence remains strong in millions of lives today, from the Arctic through South America. The arrival of Europeans and their diseases plunged Native Americans into a long decline. But in the early 21st century, the Indians' numbers have begun to rise. Just as Indians interacted with the landscape of the Americas in the past, they will play a part in deciding what it will look like and how it will be used in the future.